Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Review. I'm Phil Hargis. I'm in studio here in Las Vegas, Nevada, where all the former World Championships of fantasy football teams have just completed drafting. Now, as I told you last week, I was up in New England for the Patriots and Bengals game, and then as soon as that game was over, for some silly reason, I flew all the way across the country on JetBlue. I was able to watch the games. Got here to Vegas, but all the teams were done drafting. They must have gone off to watch the games in the studio, but it's good to be out here in Vegas. And as you can see, the draft halls are empty here, but there's a lot of exciting WCOF teams that were drafted last weekend. And to fill you in on how all the drafts went last week in Vegas, we have brought on, from previous episode, Dustin Ashby, the owner of the World Championships of Fantasy Football. So, Dustin, welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, you've survived the past month or so. I know you've had a lot of crazy times preparing for the World Championships. And go ahead and take me. You flew from St. Louis out to Vegas last week, and how did everything go out there?
Oh, it was a great weekend. It's always fun to have the best of the best in fantasy football all together in one room. And actually, we had them in 4 different cities, but the largest of the 4 events took place, of course, in Las Vegas. It started with the Thursday night viewing party. Had a great event at Legacy Stadium, a chance for everybody to watch that first game, the Saints, the Vikings. While it wasn't the shootout I'm sure many fantasy football owners were hoping for, it was still a great game nonetheless. And then Friday, all the drafts started. We had Friday morning draft masters, 1K auction leagues, 5K draft, 5K auction there in the afternoon on Friday. And then in the evening on Friday, we had the first session of our 2010 main event, and then came back on Saturday morning for our second session of the main event. In total, 876 teams are drafting a team in this year's World Championship of Fantasy Football main event. And then after the Saturday main event, we still had more. We had a $25,000 Platinum League. So it was a jam-packed weekend and a great fun for all.
So yeah, that's great. That opening game, that's great. The opening game was really surprising. As you know, those games affect the draft values of players in the main event. But I wanted to talk to you real quickly. I know you had a lot of the drafts on Friday night. So now you have a main event first flight, if you will, on Friday night. So people can choose between drafting on Friday and Saturday night. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And some guys are even putting 2 teams in because there's this. What happened was there were so many owners that wanted to participate on 2 teams. They might have a buddy draft one team and they would draft the other. And they came to us and said, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could both participate in both of these drafts? I would co-manage one guy's team and he'd co-manage my team. And at the same time, too, we were growing so quickly that there were, believe it or not, only a limited number of venues in Las Vegas where we could host the main event. And that's where the idea came about, to be able to offer 2 different sessions and to give more owners the opportunity to, one, participate, or if they want to, they can be a part of managing both teams.
That's a remarkable, great idea. I mean, if I had thought about that, yeah, that would be great. Like next year, think about to enter 2 teams in the main event to sort of double your chances of being able to win that coveted grand prize there, the $300,000 in cash, and of course the title. So you show up for the viewing party there's only so much research you can do all summer long. Everybody's kind of got the same cheat sheets in mind, then with a little bit of variation. So then the thing that's unique about the World Championships is you can actually watch the game on Thursday, which was the Saints and the Vikings. I mean, arguably some of your top fantasy players going into that game on most people's draft boards. But then they end up throwing up a kind of a snoozer there with some mistakes, a low-scoring game. So that affects the draft values of these players dramatically, because that's 1 out of the 11 games where these guys are basically not scoring any points. And then the other way you can sort of strategize prior to the main event draft is by seeing how some of these other drafts on Friday night unfold. And did you see a lot of the participants from the main event on Saturday coming out to, of course they all watched the game on Thursday, but coming out to sort of see the other drafts on Friday to see what some of the trends there might be, some of the higher and lower valued guys? I mean, did you notice anything with regards to that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think everybody wants to get as much information as possible going into the draft, and if you can discern something from watching even our Thursday night Gridiron 10K League or Invitational draft that we had, people stick around and want to watch just the flow of the draft to figure out, is Ryan Matthews going to continue to keep jumping up the draft board? Is Jermichael Finley going to be going as early as round 3? It turns out even or as early as round 2 in some leagues. And at the same time, after that Thursday night game, they want to understand what's going to happen with Desante Shinko. Is he going to go a little bit early because of that touchdown pass that he caught? And or will Adrian Peterson drop potentially? I mean, he didn't have a bad game, but it wasn't a great game. And so what's going to happen to Adrian Peterson? But, no doubt, as much information as you can get going into draft day, the better off you are.
Yeah, and it seems like for the past several years, we've always had high-scoring games on those Thursday night games, and then the one time where you actually expect a high-scoring game, you don't really get one. That was certainly interesting. So then we get to Saturday, and the drafts unfold. You probably have just hundreds and hundreds of teams out there drafting in one big ballroom. It's truly an amazing sight. So tell me some of the things you noticed about the draft. What were some of the things that made this year's draft day like truly unique, and what were some of your drafting observations? I mean, some of the biggest things that stand out in your mind from that day this year.
Well, I think first of all, it started with just the space we were in. We were in a huge 180,000 square feet ballroom, or Sands Expo, actually, exhibition space, and to be able to have the football field right there laid when you walk in the room, it just gave you the football feeling, right? That's what it's all about, the ultimate tailgate party, if you will. But once it got to the draft, there wasn't a whole lot of surprise early, for the most part. We had a couple leagues where Andre Johnson actually went number 1 overall, and we also had a couple leagues where Ray Rice went number 1 overall. And I think that just speaks to those owners' commitment towards those players. I mean, they wanted to have those two guys to build their team around, and they weren't going to wait. They went ahead and got him. Despite having that first pick overall, they wanted Ray Rice, they wanted AJ, they got him. For the most part, it was Chris Johnson, Adrian Peterson 1-2, and then Ray Rice, Maurice Jones-Drew kind of fell there in that 3-4 range. And as expected, we saw a lot of wide receivers go off the board towards the tail end of that first round. Larry Fitzgerald jumped back up into the first round in many draft boards, whereas towards the late end of the satellite season, we were actually seeing Larry Fitzgerald fall into that middle late second round because of the injury and all the unrest, unsettled issues behind the quarterback situation there in Arizona. Randy Moss, he was still in that typical 7, 8, 9 spot.
Sure.
But I think the real big star on draft day was Jermichael Finley. I mean, again, tight end, Green Bay, high-scoring offense, Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball to you. But I still didn't expect to see Jermichael Finley go as early as that early second round, middle second round on draft day.
It's totally insane. Now, you talked about these draft positions and when people take Ray Rice, first overall, or Andre Johnson, first overall. Obviously, in a perfect world, they would not want to, they know that pick could be had in the 4th to 5th range. Has it ever crossed your mind, or is it an idea that you would kick around to allow players that sign up for the main event to submit a preference for draft position, or will that just continue to be a tradition that we just do not change and it's going to always be random draft order?
Well, I won't say never is never, but I think right now, random draft order, it's part of the game. It's very similar to the NFL, NBA, any of the major sports. It's random, where you're going to draft in that lottery, so to speak. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to actually produce TV shows around the draft, and so they can actually watch the true random selection of their draft position. And look, it's always a fun discussion to have going into draft day. Which draft spot do you want? I mean, can you win from the 6 hole? Can you win from the 8 hole? The answer is you can win from any draft position. It's been proven. It can be done. And I think especially is the case this year. I mean, do you really want to have Chris Johnson as that number 1 pick with all that he did last year? You just don't know going into the beginning of the season. Now, of course, he came out strong in week 1, but you really can win from any spot on draft day.
Yeah, that's an important thing to note. And I've always stayed away from those one-year kind of guys in the big drafts that I've done. I can never imagine taking a guy like Ray Rice. I mean, Chris Johnson would be hard to pass up on that 1 year. But going back to what you said before, I mean, some of those guys. I mean, if you want to win this thing, you just have to take that guy that you think has the most upside, and that means investing your whole draft into those players. You have to do it. I remember a couple years ago when I was drafting out of Orlando, some guy took Adrian Peterson. Every single other draft board in the place showed LaDainian Tomlinson on it. So, I mean, and that guy got rewarded that year because Tomlinson was down a little bit, and then we know what kind of year Peterson had that year was just phenomenal. So I noticed you had a lot of nice cheerleaders in the crowd there too. You had some referees that looked like that were manning the draft, which was some very nice eye candy accompaniments for that draft. So. Then what other perks would you say the players get out there during the drafts? They put in some long hours out there. Do they get food? Do they get drink? Is that stuff still all going on as well?
Oh, sure, yeah. It's all part of the